You're listening to If Only I Were Wiser podcast, where Raina Wilson brings together wisdom and raw life stories to provide encouragement and truth. So many times it's easy to become discouraged in your own pursuit of health because your story or circumstances look drastically different from your favorite influencer or even the expectations you had for yourself. If that is you, welcome! This space is for you to learn, breathe, and maybe just listen and see what wellness could look like for you. Hey friends, welcome back to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast. On today's episode, I have fellow podcasting mama, Therese Dansby. Therese has been a wife for 16 years, a mom for 11, and IBCLC for 9. She pivoted from NICU nursing to lactation consulting after struggling to nurse with her first baby. Now she loves walking with moms through all the trials and triumphs that come through infant feeding and postpartum. And that's exactly what we cover in this episode. We talk through all the ups and downs and managing expectations of breastfeeding, everything that your OB didn't prepare you for, and how to really feel confident in your postpartum journey, not only with lactation, but adjusting to yourself and your new baby. So let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome, Therese, to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast.
Thank you so much.
I would love just to hear about you, your family, and then kind of how you got into the world that you did.
Yeah, I am a mom of 3. I've been married for 16 years, which is starting to make me feel old. We are in our 5th year of homeschooling. My kids range from 10 to 2, so we spaced them out a bit. I am a lactation consultant. I didn't start out that way. I went to nursing school at the same college you went to, which was always a fun connection. And I thought I wanted to be a midwife. And so I saw a video of birth in high school in my anatomy class and thought, that's what I want to do. And I went to nursing school. I tried to look for labor and delivery jobs. I didn't get any. All I got were NICU job offers. So I went to the NICU, started taking care of the babies, fell in love with that. It's kind of like, we attended deliveries. We weren't there for the whole labor, but I was like, no, the babies are good. So I did that for 7 or 8 years before getting antsy. And then I thought, maybe I do want to be a midwife after all. And I kind of had a bit of a career crisis. Like I went to grad school at the same time as I got a job in like high risk OB. And then I realized high risk OB was not for me. So then I totally pivoted to a birth center. So then I was a home visit nurse at a freestanding birth center in Kansas City. And that's where I fell more in love with lactation. I already liked it, but then I was with moms 24, 48 hours postpartum, really just helping them troubleshoot those things. So I had pursued my breastfeeding educator certificate at that time. And so it's kind of halfway there in terms of the extra hours that I needed to learn. And then thankfully, because of my job, because I had worked so directly with moms and babies for so long, I had a lot of my mentorship hours. So it was really the best case scenario for getting into lactation consulting. You have to have like 1,000 practice hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's definitely not just like a weekend class. And then you had to have 95 like learning hours specific to lactation. So thankfully it all kind of fell into place. I thought when I had my first kid, I thought, okay, maybe this is like a 10-year goal. But in hindsight, I mean, now I'm 10 years out. He's 10 years old. Right. And I would not have had the same number of practice hours accrued because they have to be pretty recent. So it ended up working out that I was able to make that switch when he was 1, which was a lot of work at the time, but no regrets because now I'm in IBCLC and I work 10 to 20 hours a week. I work in the hospital and in private practice.
Okay, cool. I love that. That sounds really fun and just like really cool to see like your transition and that more where you wanted to be.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so special. What was it like being with the NICU babies?
I loved it for a long time. It was by and large mostly a happy place. I think for a while I got people saying, oh, the NICU must be so sad. But really when you work in a level 3 or 4 NICU, which is, big NICUs in big cities.
Okay. Yeah.
You have a lot of resources, and really the survival rate is very good. I think there are NICU reunions every year, and so it took a lot of NICU reunions for me to start seeing that just because the babies go home acting like babies doesn't mean that they always progress the way that you would like to think that they do, which so the more I did it, the more bittersweet it became. But I mean, I loved it. It was just once I had my own baby, I couldn't like stick other babies with needles anymore. So yeah,
Yeah. Wow, that's such a good point. I wouldn't have thought about that.
it was very hard. And suddenly I could tolerate other babies crying, no problem. And then I had my own, and then baby crying was like painful to me. And so I needed to switch. And this kind of picks up all of the things that I used to be interested in,
Yeah.
like nutrition, and even like I have a podcast, and in college I was in journalism too,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just it's fun to see how it has kind of picked up everything I'm interested in, finally got where I wanted to be. Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't have thought about it like that either. But let's kind of jump head first into all things
Yeah.
boobies, lactation,
Yeah.
postpartum, get into the nitty gritty of it. So, what are some of the first things that you're seeing or hoping for? You're walking into a mom's room
Mhm.
postpartum.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing I'm interested in is knowing what they want.
Okay.
And if they don't know, then kind of talking them through their options. I'm really big on informed consent, which sounds weird in lactation because we're not giving medications or,
No, but still,
performing procedures. Yeah, I mean, and I want people to know the benefits and risks of things that they're choosing. Whether that's, oh, we're just going to feed with formula till my milk comes in, or
mm-hmm.
we're going to exclusively pump for bottles. I'm like, well, let's talk through this, how this actually looks, where you want to be, and if this gets you there. So I used to say my goal is always helping the mom meet her goals, but the more I do it, just the more true that is, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if a mom breastfeeds for 3 years, which is kind of weird
Yeah,
to say, but I want her to feel empowered, which is maybe an overused word, but to really make the choices that are best for her. And just because I think breastfeeding is a good choice, it, not everybody does. Some people get very offensive when I walk into a room, and some people are defensive, I guess. And
interesting.
yeah, and it's just because of previous interactions they've had with someone somewhere along the line. Sometimes I will have home visits too, where we spend 90 minutes together, and then they text me. I check in on them a week later, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I stopped." And it's like a very ashamed, and they're like telling me excuses, and I always have to say, if you feel like you did what you could and you had the information you needed, then it was a successful visit. So
Sure. Yeah. And I've shared previously too, like I think one of the things I missed out on in our postpartum nursing journey was knowing how to use my pump. Like I remember talking to a nurse friend afterwards, and she's like, yeah, Rainey, you could have brought your pump to, like either to one of your regular prenatal visits or like talk to your lactation consultant that had come in. I'm like, I didn't know what I didn't know. That would have been so helpful. I was watching YouTube videos at like 3 days postpartum because like I didn't know what I was doing, and we were still nursing, but like I wasn't equipped with other options. So I guess like what are some of the other options you present to moms that may have never even heard that there are options?
Yeah, well, and that's a great point, because with my first, I was also like, I don't need a pump till 12 weeks when I go back to work. And then he was a slow nurser, and he had a tongue tie, and he wasn't removing milk, and I was really engorged, and I had to borrow a pump from a friend. So yeah, get your pump when you're pregnant and learn how to use it. Some of the options, a lot of them are really being flexible and looking at the big picture, because and most of the moms I see, their goal is to get back to exclusive breastfeeding for at least a year. I mean, that's a pretty common goal. Usually when I see them, either the baby was losing weight and they needed supplementation, so they kind of got off track that way, or they are having pain with the latch and maybe taking some pumping breaks and things like that. But as long as we protect the mom's milk supply by pumping, usually, if the baby's not latching well, and then keep the baby fed. We have about 3 to 4 months to bring it all back together again. So as long as they're being proactive about it, there's a lot of variations of combo feeding that can get us to a goal of exclusive breastfeeding if we need to. It's not normally something I volunteer, but like I said, people come to me already in all sorts of feeding situations. And so we just work with what we have. And more often than not, we get where we want to go if the mom's really wanting to make it work.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is a common misconception, but should nursing be painful? Like, I understand the initial your milk is coming in. I remember the first 3 days I just like wanted to cry all day.
Yeah.
But I think that's different from consistent pain while nursing.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a few things at play there. First, that hormone drop when your placenta comes out and you lose all that progesterone, it makes everybody tearful.
Yeah.
Whether you're in pain or not, it makes you tearful. Second of all, pain is cumulative. So if you're in any degree of pain from birth, which most people are, even just kind of a tenderness or a pinching is going to hurt more because you're kind of clenched up. And then while that progesterone is dropping, it does make your nipples more sensitive. So the first few days, even if baby has a perfect latch, it can be more sensitive. Kind of like in the first trimester, a lot of people's breast gets really sore and tender and sensitive, and those hormones are still in your system for a few days. So all of that can be normal. The initial latch, the baby has to draw that nipple all the way back to their soft palate, ideally, which is way back in their mouth. So that's a lot of stretching. And for most people, that's kind of 15 to 30 seconds of like, ooh, okay, that doesn't feel great. But then it should subside. You're right. People will say, my sister told me that I need to, scab and bleed, and then they toughen up, and that's a red flag.
Okay, that's good to know, because I've had friends that have talked about that or talked about their experiences. I have heard that silverettes are super helpful in terms of like being an easy solution in the midst of that. But I've also heard like we shouldn't get to that point of scabbing and bleeding and
both.
All of that.
It's funny. I was just thinking I need to post a story and take a poll. Like, am I the only IBCLC that doesn't like silverettes? I'm not sure.
Really?
I'm not trying to be.
Let's hear it.
I'm not trying to be contrary, but so the silver is antimicrobial. Great. It keeps the shirt from rubbing if your nipples are sore. Plenty of people love them. I'm not actually dissing them. But if I have a mom that has cracked nipples, I like hydrogels better, or Lancino's brand is called Soothies. They're not medicated. It's just a colloid substance. They used to be used for burn wounds, and somebody figured out they worked for cracked nipples. They keep the scabs moist, which sounds weird, but if you have a hard scab and then the baby latches on, it hurts more. The thing I find with silverettes is people wearing them preventively sometimes get into trouble with things like thrush. So they'll be like, I saw these on TikTok, I bought them, I'm just wearing them on day one in the hospital, and I'm like, well, you need airflow, you need circulation. Don't really wear them preventively. If you buy them, buy the name brand too, because the knockoffs might have a different mixture of metals that can be irritating. So,
dang.
Yeah. Nipples are a very sensitive part of the body, going through a lot.
So how does that work with thrush? I guess just the bacteria for that.
Yeah, even though the silver is antimicrobial, it just traps the moisture in. Like, there's no airflow. There are breast shells that other companies make that have airflow vents in the side. They're not as cutesy, and they're plastic, so they're not, but usually those are kind of the directions I'm pointing my clients in. I don't have beef with silverette. I just, I'm like, I don't fully recommend them to everybody yet, because I just, they're not cheap either. And so there's a few other things to spend your money on first.
Sure. And that's something I definitely thought about, because I didn't hear about them till after, we're a year and a half postpartum. And I'm like, dang, because we ended up doing the creams. And for me, it just didn't work, because I was like, it got, I'm weird about textures. So I was like, it got everywhere. I'm already leaking everywhere else. Like, the last thing I want is like sport on my boobs. Anyway.
Yeah. And people love or hate the creams, and they don't really do a whole lot. So we've even gotten away from giving out samples in the hospital because, like, they just don't do a whole lot. Some people like them for pumping and lubrication and things like that. But for the most part, there's definitely other things to try. But yeah, cracking and bleeding is never normal. I mean, no shame. With my second, and I was an IBCLC at that point, and I had cracked and bleeding nipples, but we were just really proactive about getting out of that place and figuring out what was going on. So don't tough through it thinking it will go away on its own. I'm always shocked. There are people who are like, yes, this happens with every baby, and at 2 weeks, it's gone. For most people, it's just lingering and lingering and lingering until they get help.
Right. So what are some other, I guess, red flags or things that you notice with people is like, hey, we should probably pick up on this versus like letting this continue?
Yeah, and this is one that I experienced with my first because he was eating all the time, and he was nursing for like an hour at a time. And then he would root around and act like he was starving when he was done. And my little NICU nurse brain was like, no, babies just eat every 3 hours. You ate for an hour, like you're good. And it didn't really cross my mind at that point. I was not a lactation consultant, but also your clinical brain and your mom brain don't work at the same time. So he was not transferring enough. When I finally did see lactation, I mean, he was transferring like an ounce in that hour.
Oh, wow.
So he was starving. So don't dismiss your baby's cues because you feel like they're checking some boxes. And another red flag that I see is babies who are constantly cluster feeding. Cluster feeding is very normal in certain semi-predictable intervals, like days 2 and 3, weeks 2 and 3 when they're getting back to birth weight, kind of 3 months and 6 months when they're having big growth spurts, anytime they're sick. But cluster feeding should not be like day in and day out. If it is, then something else might be going on with milk supply or milk removal or something like that.
Huh. I wouldn't have ever thought about that.
Yeah. It should just kind of last about 3 to 5 days and go away. And if it's not, and you're constantly feeding your baby every hour around the clock, then it could be easier for you.
So what do you think, kind of moving away from some of the specific early nursing things, we don't honor in the mother in those early days? Because in my head, I remember coming out postpartum, like, need to nurse. Like all things were babies, like need to learn how to feed this baby. I need to learn how to change a diaper with a small penis. Like I need to, like all of these, like really, please don't touch his umbilical cord kind of things. What are the things that we're missing for the mom that you see as a lactation consultant postpartum?
I think culturally we're getting a little bit better about this. But yeah, definitely the mom is still a whole human being and not just the, person who did all the work.
Supply.
Yeah. So I think that hormonal shift, we kind of talked about it with the nipple pain, but I think when you're pregnant with your first, you can't really fathom how you're going to be that different. You understand, okay, I'm going to get this baby out somehow. That probably will be difficult to some degree, but then then it'll be fine, and you just don't realize how much of a change your brain and your body are going to go through postpartum. That progesterone drops, it's the lowest it'll ever be till menopause, and the sleep deprivation even, and I was somebody who had worked night shift. I had woken up early to work out, like just I thought I kind of understood what sleep deprivation was, and I didn't.
Nope.
Yeah, it's different when you can't like clock out, and your estrogen's really low. Your cortisol in early postpartum is actually very low as well. And so we don't even get the energy from like the stress hormones right off the bat. And your prolactin is high, which can be inflammatory. Obviously, it serves a purpose too in making your milk. So you're just in a really vulnerable state, and a state that you've never been in before if it's your first baby. And so it's hard to even plan for it. We can say, oh, like we'll do the 5 days in bed, 5 days on bed, 5 days around bed.
Sure.
and there's just so much variation. So I think a lot of it, like society needs to be gentler with moms, but I think moms need to be gentler with themselves too. Just, you don't have to bounce back and be, I have a client, I almost never talk about clients on podcasts, but she got a C-section and then she just like did not rest at all. And part of that's her personality type, but we were at her 6-week appointment and she was like, I'm still bleeding. Is that normal? And I'm like, well, yeah, because you haven't like rested.
Yeah.
Your uterus hasn't had a chance to like really kind of contract down and stay there. So bleeding can be a sign for that you're pushing it too much. If you have a really busy day of appointments or something and the bleeding starts again, that's your body saying like, not yet.
Yeah.
So I think there's that with the moms. And I think that one thing I also didn't realize is just how connected we are to our babies. I mean, it makes sense, but that felt sense of connection with your baby, like when they hurt, you hurt. When they cry, you cry. When they're happy. Even just last night, I had a mom who was really anxious, had a C-section, and the baby hadn't really latched yet. So I got in there and then the baby latched and started rhythmically nursing. And the mom just like her whole demeanor changed.
Oh.
I mean, it's just amazing what we like hold for our babies.
Well, that was me. Straight in my head, that was me. But it was also me understanding post C-section that at my 6-week appointment, I was like, I thought my period had started because I was bleeding. And then kind of in the back of my mind, my doctor was no help at all whatsoever. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I like did a walk, literally from like our driveway to like the stop sign, 300 yards away. And I'm like, that probably need to not do that yet,
Yeah, and it's so funny because like 2 weeks ago, that was not a far distance. But
right, yeah.
Suddenly you've had a baby and everything's shifted.
The whole body freaks out.
Yeah.
I want to just pivot just a little bit as we circle back to moms postpartum. What do you recommend to C-section moms while breastfeeding? Because that was something I don't think I was prepared for. Because everybody was like, here's your, get your boppy pillow. You put the baby on the pillow and then you nurse your baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember my lactation consultant coming in and I'm like, I can't hold my baby. Please like help me do this because I can't hold him the way that I've seen everybody. Like, I don't know how to nurse. I've seen all the videos and the pictures. Like, I can't have that pressure on my stomach right now. So like, how do we do this?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And this mom last night, it was her 4th baby, but her first C-section, and so she was like, nothing that I know is working right now,
right?
Which is frustrating. I think, and I will say, I have not had a C-section, but I had endometriosis surgery this winter, and it gave me like a whole new appreciation because then I still was nursing my toddler, and just nursing somebody unpredictable when you have abdominal incisions is not for the faint of heart. So kudos to the moms who are even like continuing at that. It does get better. I mean, would you say it gets better? Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. When was the turning point for you? In terms of like the breastfeeding with the C-section?
Yeah. I mean, Ledger latched pretty well. Like I remember they're like, put him on the boob. And then he was like on the boob and then stayed on a boob for an hour. And I was like, isn't he supposed to come off? And then, we had a lactation consultant come in and like double check everything. And I would say once my scar tenderness started to get better, really around like 6 to 8 weeks once it closed.
Okay. Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I was going to throw up every time I like turned.
Yeah.
I could work through the pressure of nursing. And then honestly, even before that, I just had to adjust my physical body positioning and like you said, learn some other ways to do this.
Yeah. So 6 weeks is kind of what I tell people too. So that's good to know that kind of is your experience too, which feels like a long time when you're in the thick of it. But I will recommend talking to their doctor about an abdominal binder. I don't know if you used one.
Yeah.
A lot of times that just helps people feel more secure with their incision. And then of course everybody's abs at the end of pregnancy are kind of wrecked for a while. Yeah, because some moms are like, well, I can't pull the baby out of football hold. And I was like, that's not a C-section thing. That's a postpartum thing. Like your abs are not really connected or working together right now. So I like, this position is getting a little bit more popular now on social media, kind of one of those quote unquote like open breastfeeding position.
Okay.
I think technically it's called the prone oblique position. So the baby, it's kind of like cradle hold, except instead of the baby like facing the ceiling, they're facing you. So their belly is against your belly. And some C-section moms might be like, ooh, but your incision is so down low that if they're like across, like, oh, why can't I think of the word that I want to use? Not parallel or horizontal. Wow. But they're at an angle,
sure,
if people can't see me gesturing. And so they shouldn't be like kicking your incision. And that works really well for moms because you can recline in the hospital bed and do it.
Yep. I think that's what I ended up doing was like anytime I like laid down almost. I looked like a banana, but like.
Yeah. Yeah. Use the bed to your advantage and ask your lactation consult for a reclined position. And it takes a while because like, reclined breastfeeding is a little bit awkward because your boob wants to flop sideways because of gravity. So, and it's like, is the baby going to be on top? Is the baby coming from the side? It takes some practice, but stick with it because you will probably find some sort of reclined position that works. Side lying is another option. It's usually easier when moms have breastfed before. Sometimes with the first baby, they're like, the baby's so tiny, like this doesn't work right away. But I like that one as an option as well. The other thing, if you cannot get comfortable in either of those, is it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but get out of the bed and into a chair.
Okay.
And the chair is much more supportive. Those beds, even when you mess with the angles, they just put all that pressure right on your tailbone and your lower back. And so then you might be bracing your abs to compensate. So if you can't get comfortable reclining, get out of the bed into a chair and get some pillows behind you, really supported, and see if you can get the baby positioned that way too.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's pillows. Maybe it's, like you said, knowing your posture. But what are some of the like non-negotiable things, either for you personally or like when you walk in a clinic that you are like fighting for this new mom?
Like in terms of positioning the baby or in terms of just like what I'm telling them when they leave a consult.
Just like set up. Yeah.
One thing I tell them is that the name of the position doesn't matter and we need to do whatever works. But because sometimes they do come, especially with social media and these, quote unquote, open feeding positions, like that might work really well for you and it might not. Or it might, some people just are also not super comfortable handling babies.
Yeah.
And
it's
new. If it's your first baby and you don't have nieces and nephews and your friends haven't had kids yet, like we just have to find the position that you and the baby are the most comfortable in. I do say most positions, regardless of what position you're in, I want the baby's belly facing the mom. So I never want like the baby's stomach facing one way and their head turned the other way, because that's almost always going to be shallow. And that's in the beginning. I mean, older babies do what they want to do.
Literally.
The other thing is, some people hate this cue, but I always tell moms to line the baby's nose up with her nipple.
Okay.
Because then the baby has to look up. People are so confused. They're like, how on earth do you latch with the nose to the nipple? Right. I'm like, well, the point is to get the baby's reflexes engaged so that they actually do the latching, because the moms are so, and you can't see that much when it's actually your baby. So you're like nipple, mouth.
Yeah. Right.
And then a lot of babies are like on, off, pushing away. They're crying, the nipple's in their mouth. And it's like, you just need to shift them a little bit so they're looking up a little bit. Once their chin gets buried and you like tickle their nose, they will come up and over and get that really deep asymmetrical latch on their own, which works a lot better than trying to get the breast in their mouth just so. So yeah, that's a big one. But and then taking a breath, like relaxing your own shoulders, lean back, even if you're not in a reclining position, like bring the baby to you, don't be hunched over the baby. Things like that are pretty universal in terms of just everybody having a better experience.
Yeah, that changed the game for me, was when I had heard like, bring the baby to you, not you to the baby. Yeah. So don't look like this gremlin hunched over this baby.
And you don't even know you're doing it because you're just so focused on getting a latch. And And then I'm like, okay, now we're latched. So like now, lean back, rest your shoulders, take a deep breath. And that if you're having some pinching, it is surprising how much taking a deep breath and relaxing your shoulders can just bring it down like 1 degree.
That's so true. I wish I had you, Therese.
I know. Well, I know. Same. I definitely overcompensated because my first breastfeeding journey was hard. And I was like, well, I'm halfway equipped to do this job. So I'm just going to go all in.
So what would you say are 5 easy ways that we can prepare for mother-baby postpartum before the baby is born? And like we mentioned, take your pump to the hospital and ask all your questions. Yeah. That could be one of them.
Yes, get your pump. Even if you're like, I'm never going to pump. My baby's always going to be with me.
You never know.
Never know. Yeah. So yeah, I think take a birth and breastfeeding class with your partner. That's important too. And make sure that one of those classes is teaching you about kind of the 4th trimester and sleep, because it's also one thing. A lot of us are scrolling social media, we're listening to podcasts, we're learning about these things, and our spouses aren't. And they're very well-meaning and well-intentioned, but if they are not coming at it from the same place that you are, they're putting a lot of pressure on you to have all the answers, which even I was a literal baby professional and I didn't have all the answers, and so it's kind of hard. It's just like more pressure imposed upon you, even when they're trying to help. So I really recommend taking those classes together. My doula with my first had us talk about like, why do you want a pain-free birth? And that was really good for me to actually or not a pain-free birth, a pain medication-free birth. I never tell people birth is pain-free. That is a trend that I don't understand. But it was good for me to actually think about it, like not just, I feel like that's what I should do, and verbalize that to him so he could understand too, when I'm asking for an epidural at 0 hour, like, are you really, or are you just saying that like you're overwhelmed by this in the moment? And then same with breastfeeding, if they understand. Or maybe you are just kind of like, we're going to try this and see if it works or not. And that's an okay place to be too, as long as both of you are on the same page. I have had very awkward situations in which often the dad is like a chiropractor or a pediatrician or some other health professional who like actually wants breastfeeding to work more than the mom does. And that's really uncomfortable for everyone too. So yeah, it's important to be on the same page, and usually setting aside a whole Saturday to learn about it is the way to do that. Freezer meals or meal trains, I'm a huge fan. I feel like food is my love language. So yeah, if somebody asks what they can do, don't be afraid to say, hey, can you set up a meal train? I mean, there's literally a website called mealtrain.com that makes it so easy. And then when somebody else says, hey, how can we help you? They just have to send a link instead of being like, oh, could you bring dinner on such and such day and try to coordinate it? Yeah. And I have a little freezer meal freebie for people to plan 12 meals and freeze them ahead of time. I did not do that with my first, and I definitely regretted it. Because again, you think, oh, like how different can I possibly feel a week from now? And then I'm like, I cannot even stand at the stove for 10 minutes. Like, yeah. So I think the third one would be a postpartum cart. I think breastfeeding carts kind of trend every now and then, but I think this is like the immediate postpartum, because you never know. I mean, if you have a C-section or my third, I hemorrhaged, and like I was not getting out of bed, going around the house collecting stuff after he was born. So I think I have a cart with like all of your pads, all of your little postpartum diapers, postpartum herbal baths, clean nursing tanks, your pump sanitized and cleaned and ready to go, and even a few like 5 baby outfits and the baby diapers, like if you have an herbal peri spray, all of that like on a cart at your bedside, so that you're not digging around. Because we're also focused on like bringing the baby home. Like you said, we've got the umbilical cord, the diapers, the first outfit,
the car seat, it's like all these things.
Yeah, it's like, well, yeah, you need an outfit too. And if you're delivering in the hospital, like bring your own clothes. I never ever wore a hospital gown. You don't have to, and they're kind of awkward to nurse into. At our hospital, they're like these little slits that your boobs are supposed to come out of, and it's just so much material. So like bring a nursing tank, bring nursing pajamas, all of that stuff too. The fourth one would be put your providers in your phone and your husband's phone ahead of time. So this is like OB, midwife, doula, lactation consultant, counselor. For me, after my third, I did some progesterone injections, which were like
really
life-changing for postpartum depression. Yeah, they were so helpful. But I didn't do them until 5 months postpartum because I was overwhelmed with making the phone call. You know, because it was like, I know who I need to call, but simply Googling them and calling them during the 8 to 5 office hours was like too much for me. Had my husband known, I mean, I didn't even verbalize this to him. He totally would have called them
for
like
sure.
2 weeks in and set that appointment up for me and driven me there. So yeah, get all those numbers programmed in beforehand. Even if you're like, well, I'm not going to need a postpartum counselor, like at least pick one or two. And if you need them, you've already done that research. The last one would be to talk with your partner beforehand about visitors and boundaries and who's communicating with who, especially in terms of families and in-laws, and, you know, have a signal when you're ready for people to leave.
Yeah. Take them out.
Yeah. Like, you know, whether you have visitors in the hospital or at home, you know, you never know what your threshold for that is going to be till you're there.
No, those are all super, super helpful, especially I think the having your providers or the support that you need in your phone, because you are exactly right. Thinking about the mental load of trying to schedule postpartum appointments.
It's crazy. Yeah.
That would have made a huge difference.
Yeah. And then it's like 9 p.m. every time and you're like, I didn't call.
Yes. Well, even for us, it was like, I know we should probably, and you can maybe speak a little bit more on this. I know we should probably go see a lactation consultant because I feel like I was overproducing, or I felt like I was like drowning.
Yeah.
And it took us 3 weeks to get to the, you know, to like look up when the office hours were, because they had like walk-in office hours or like, you know, and I think that would have made all the difference if I had just like written that down ahead of time for everybody.
Yep. Or even some people will even set appointments with me ahead of time, because if they had trouble breastfeeding their first, they're like, this is when I'm due and I'm going to set an appointment at 2 weeks after my due date. Like one way or another, the baby's going to be here. Like I'm coming in. And and you know, then you finally make the call and then you have to wait another week or two to get in. And
oh, that's super helpful. One of the other things, I don't know if you've seen them, but Eat Mama Meals is like a regenerative, holistic, super nourishing meal service. That is like, whenever we have this like second baby, that is my like number one thing. Is y'all just don't buy us anything else. Just feed me, you know, and feed me the stuff that I wish I had known that is actually going to heal my body postpartum. Not just calories, but like the calories that matter.
Yeah, I ordered them after my surgeries this winter and they were so good. Yeah. It's like,
really?
They were amazing. They're like, this is not an ad. They're like shatavari rice pudding. So good. I could eat it again right now. But yeah, and when you deliver in the hospital I work at actually has pretty good food. The hospital I delivered at, it was terrible. Like I eat gluten-free, so that basically eliminated like almost all of the options. And then it was like, here's a cold chickpea salad. And it's like, okay, maybe that's fine, except it's December and it's cold. And that's kind of
I just delivered
fiber.
This baby.
Yeah, like, oh, it was such a bummer. Mama Meals came out like maybe 6 months after he was born. And I was like, oh my gosh, where was this? It would have been perfect to take to the hospital. So
yeah. No, I love Holly. We're all about her here. But you said you also serve as a doula. Is that right?
Yeah, I trained as a doula and I did work as a postpartum doula as well for like a year and a half, 2 years, not very long. It was kind of, we moved to a new state in March of 2020, like right before everything shut down. So I wasn't loving the hospital and I didn't have a huge like reputation is a weird word, but like people didn't know about me. I didn't have a whole lot of breastfeeding clients. So postpartum doula contracts were an easier way for me to like get some work in, still take care of babies, meet some people. And I really loved it. I think once I had my third baby, I didn't have the margin for all of, doing that job well. But it's a really cool job. I liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever shared this on the show. We had a postpartum doula. It was not the best experience. I think my husband and I did the best that we could to like align with somebody that had our values, but also we didn't know what we didn't know,
No.
So like to talk through things or like, we checked the main boxes, I feel like, but there were just things that went sideways and it was rough. So from like a doula perspective, what would you encourage people to like look for or while interviewing or like, I don't know, make sure you guys fit?
Yeah. And that's so hard. Yeah. Because you are inviting somebody into like a really sacred space. And so that bums me out for you. I'm sorry. That should be like I had a not similar experience, but with my third, postpartum doulas are expensive too. And, the irony of me doing that and being like, I can't afford to pay somebody $30 an hour. And I did finally ask somebody, like kind of a friend, but I was like, hey, I just need like a week of this, we were like several months out at that point. And then she got COVID and couldn't come.
Yeah.
I was so disappointed. So I don't know what it's like to have my own postpartum doula. I had birth doulas that I loved. It's interviewing, and even more than the questions, it is just getting the vibe for them. The birth world is interesting because natural birth and even breastfeeding, people tend to swing more to like the far right or the far left, which is it's interesting. Same with homeschooling too. So it's like we can't always assume, and I wouldn't necessarily classify myself as like a far right person, but I'm more on that side of the spectrum. And you can't always assume that somebody has your same values just because they value natural childbirth or they value breastfeeding. Yeah. So sometimes I did work for an agency, so I can't say don't look for agency doulas, but sometimes the bigger agencies, if you live in a big city, definitely are just essentially renting a nanny kind of, and not so much looking for the real kind of sacred postpartum experience. So a lot of it is asking around. Like, I don't love Facebook groups, but I love them for sourcing providers, because you say, hey, like, I want a provider who, list your value, list your dream provider, and see who they throw out there, because some people don't really advertise their postpartum doula services. Like I don't, but if I had a past client recommend me, I might consider taking a contract. You know what I mean? But if somebody Googles postpartum doulas in this zip code, they're not going to find me. So, and some birth doulas take on a very limited number of postpartum clients too, and they just don't advertise it. So it's almost more of a word of mouth thing. And then interviewing them, have coffee, just have a conversation about anything, and you'll get a lot of information from them.
Yeah, I think we did what we could,
Yeah, exactly. And you don't know what you don't know. Even with subsequent kids, you just learn something new. I think it would be important to ask them what their own postpartum experiences were like. And I think you'll get a good idea of how they handle difficult situations. And whether that vibes with you. Because some people are like, this horrible thing happened, but I don't like to dwell on it. And that's I know that's like not me at all. But some people are like, I don't want somebody to keep harping on this horrible thing that happened. I just want to like move past it. Versus other people like, I want to dig into this. I want to talk through my birth story. Yeah. Like, if they tell you how their postpartums went, you'll get a really good idea for what they value and how they approach those things.
Oh, that's a really good point, because my husband and I talked about it, that honestly I would just call like one of my best friends and be like, look, I need you not only just to be the second set of hands, which I think is what she turned into, which again I think the Lord was over our birth and we needed her and we needed the extra body.
It has its place.
for everything that was going on. But yeah, I think it's such a sacred space, a very intimate space where, you know, you're, as a mother, like, you're meeting a whole other side of yourself. So to invite somebody into like that rawness is really special. But at the same time, I want somebody, you know, whether it's birth doula or just postpartum doula, I was like, I wanted somebody to maybe give me different birthing positions, not me. It's like look at my husband, I'm like, can you go through my like saved folder, babe, and like on Instagram and like pull up stuff that I had saved. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Oh, it's so hard. Yeah. You need somebody to mother the mother too. So somebody who even just has that mothering personality, kind of. Yeah.
Well, this one is a little bit off topic as we lean into closing, but now that your kids are a little bit older, or your first is a little bit older, how would you say that mothering is different, kind of hard in each season versus like having all littles?
Yeah, this was a very pertinent question. I've talked about it a little bit on Instagram. I feel like we talk about matrescence in terms of going from maiden to mother, and then we don't talk about it a whole lot after that. But it really continues to evolve. Even you've experienced like going from the baby, mothering a baby to mothering a toddler. Like, it's different. And I think you're in that phase for so long, the first 5 or 6 years. Like, yes, your baby drastically changes in the first 5 or 6 years, but also not. Like, your life still kind of revolves around nap time and rest time and those early bedtimes. And, you know, the physical recovery, I think, still lasts years, especially if you're breastfeeding. Like, you know, postpartum can last years. And so I think that when my oldest kind of turned 9, like, the way that I had been parenting just suddenly wasn't really working anymore, which was kind of a shock to me, because I was like, I'm 9 years in, I should kind of know what's going on. But middle motherhood is the adventure that I'm on right now, with a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and then, you know, my 2-year-old tagging along for fun,
just to bring in the spice.
But just keeping me, you know, humble. I think the biggest change is that the built-in margins, I mean, just tactically, the margins get much smaller as your kids get older. Like, they stay up later. Even though we try really hard to limit activities, I still find that, like, Mondays are crazy. Like, we have dance and scouts and basketball. Like, why are they all on the same day? I don't know. But, you know, so like those 7 o'clock bedtimes are not happening anymore. And I do still rest and nap with my youngest as much as I can, but sometimes the big kids have their book club,
things
or
going
we have
on.
Wild and Free. Yeah. So those margins kind of disappear, which I needed those margins for my mental health after every baby. Like, I just needed that expectation of, like, I'm not doing anything for the next 90 minutes to 2 hours because it's rest time and I'm resting too. That was like one thing I did well postpartum. There were a lot of things I would do differently, but if you can lay down with your baby and kind of safely co-sleep with them at nap time, highly recommend it. And if you can't, you might need to talk to somebody about postpartum anxiety, because that was me with my first, like, tired but wired. Just, how do people sleep when their baby sleeps? You know? But then with my second and third, I was like, oh, okay, this is how. So, I think so. There's less free time. I got a little list here. We homeschool, and so as an introvert, that's just a struggle for me too. Because without those nap times, I'm like, when's my alone time coming?
Reset.
Yeah, and I really hate it when people say big kids, big problems. Or I had, even last night at work, the janitor came into the office and I was like yawning while I was finishing up my charting, and she was like, oh, just wait till your kids are teenagers. And I'm like, are we still doing that just to wait thing?
I know. We're not about that.
Yeah. But, and I don't have teenagers yet, but the good thing about babies, and the hard thing, why it's so hard unceasingly, is that babies, their physical and their emotional needs are kind of the same. So like when you're breastfeeding your baby and making eye contact with them, like you're feeding them, you're keeping them warm, you're hydrating them, and you're connecting with them. But with bigger kids, those things are separate. So I find that like it's easy, thankfully, to keep my kids clothed and fed, but it's not so easy to connect with them. Yeah. And it's not, it's harder. It's harder than connecting with a toddler. Like we can go to the playground and have a blast with my 2-year-old, and it's more challenging to like really connect with my older kids. So, and when they're little, it's easier for me to tell how they're doing and how we are as a unit, because I mean, a toddler will tell you, a baby will tell you, but the bigger kids, it's like, oh, are they like chilling and playing Legos right now because they feel left out, or like, not mad at me, but you know, like, oh, are we distant, or are you really just chilling and taking a break? That's harder for me to figure out. So that's just kind of what I'm learning right now. And I know that once I get the hang of it, we'll be moving on to like the teen years.
Yeah. But that's so wise, Therese. I am so thankful for that. Just like a different perspective and just like speaking wisdom into this sacred season. So where can we get connected with you? Like you said, you have a postpartum meal plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We definitely need that.
Yes. Yeah. I love it. It's, my Instagram is at happy.mama.healthy.baby. If you click in the link in profile, which I guess isn't cool anymore, but that's where all my links are.
Okay.
If you, right at the top is like free freezer meal. It does sign you up for my emails, but I'm lucky if I send out one a month. So I promise you're not going to get spammed. It's a printout with like 12 freezer meals, lactation cookies and granola, and all the ingredients and how to prep them when you're pregnant and all that stuff. So yeah, and I used it with my second and third kid and like fine-tuned it. So I love sharing that. And then I have a podcast called Milk and Motherhood, where we talk about breastfeeding and postpartum. And I have a private practice here outside of Omaha, Nebraska. So my website is happymamahealthybaby.co. And I was going to say, speaking of postpartum doulas, if you have listeners in the Kansas City area or the Omaha area, I'd be happy to point them towards people that would be a good fit too.
Yay. Yes. Awesome, Therese. I love that. I'm so thankful for your wisdom. So for our closing question, if you could provide any wisdom to your younger self or for a community that is listening, what would you share?
As I was thinking about this one, I think it says something about the shift that I'm in that I actually don't know how to answer this question. I think it maybe would have been easier for me like 2 years ago, but there's a point where the older I get, the less I know, which is interesting. I forget, there's a curve, I forget what it's called, but it's like when you're a newbie and you think you know everything versus when you're an expert and you know nothing. So I think I would tell my younger self to have some grace, and plenty of people tell me that along the way. People still tell me that like almost weekly, like you have got to have more grace for yourself. But you don't magically arrive at adulthood. I think that I would, you know, you graduate college, oh, you turn 25, oh, you turn 30, like, should I be adulting now? So I spent a lot of years feeling like everybody else knew what adulting was and I didn't. And I wish I would have just been kinder to myself and understood that it's a process. And I think having kids taught me that more than anything else did. It just forces you to grow up a little bit and consider other perspectives. And when we watch our babies learn to walk, like we expect them to wobble and fall down and get back up. And we know that's how they learn and they get stronger and it reinforces it. But somehow if I like fall and mess up, I'm so hard on myself. And so even just watching my kids, I remember like we expect to make mistakes. We seek comfort and encouragement. And then, if I look at myself as, you know, when my youngest or my oldest was 9 months old or my youngest, none of my kids slept well. I just felt so shameful for not having it figured out. Like, oh, what am I doing wrong that my kids aren't sleeping or they aren't this or that? But it's just ever evolving. And like our kids, we learn that when we fall and get up, we learn what it takes to get it right the next time.
That's so wise too, just to think from a perspective of like, I give my kids this grace because they're learning how to human.
They've never done it before.
Right. Like, why don't I give myself this grace because I've never been a mom to like a 3.5-year-old like this day,
exactly.
right?
I've never been 39 before. I've never had 3 kids before. Like, why would I expect to just know how to do it because I knew how to take care of 2 kids?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, Therese, this has been such an awesome conversation. Yeah. I am happy to link all of your stuff and get you connected, hopefully to the local listeners in your area. But I'm so thankful for your wisdom, and just thanks for joining us on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to connect.
Of course. And we will see you guys on the next episode.
Hey friends, I want to let you in on a secret. I fell for the hype that digital resources were all the rage and the way to serve your community last year. Hence, really the birth of Return to Rest, my ultimate rest resource. Now, that was birthed from a place that I am really passionate about rest. I have realized that us as women, and especially mothers, are lacking in ultimate rest. Rest in our creator, rest in our bodies, because we're juggling so many things. We're trying to steward the health of our family and our kids and our spouse and ourselves, and we just keep chasing. Now, it doesn't matter the beef liver that you're taking or the red light sessions that you're doing if you are not rested. So, while Return to Rest really meets that need and gives you tangible ways to plug in actual habits that will reset your rest rhythms, I realized that something was lacking, and that is tangible accountability and community. So since you guys are my loyal listener family, I'm letting you behind the curtain a little bit. Over the next couple months, I'm creating just that, taking Return to Rest to a whole new level and providing tangible accountability and community in a way that really will have to force us to transform our rest rhythms. Otherwise, friends, burnout is not just around the corner. It's going to be the name of the game for our family and for our hearts. So, if you need something to chew on until that comes out, go ahead and snag Return to Rest. I just dropped the price by $20 because I really want it to serve you. I want it in your hands, and it's a reusable resource for whatever season you're in. And keep an eye out as name pending for this new creation is coming. I'm so excited, and I really hope that it'll bless you because I know you need it, just as I do. Thank you for listening, friend. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you don't want to miss any wisdom or encouragement, be sure to subscribe to the show. And don't forget to rate and review. Your feedback means so much and helps our community grow. If you're looking for more wellness wisdom and free resources, head over to livingwiselywell.com or get connected with me on Instagram at wiselywell. And if you're looking for a break from the hurried health lifestyle, check out my Return to Rest resource for tangible ways to slow down and finally find rest.